Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine war update news segment for the 4th of March 2023. Just to let you know that I had a 1 week suspension from YouTube for reasons that were incredibly vague and unknown, and I've been challenging to no effect. As part of that process, I'm not allowed to have chapters on my videos for 3 months. So these are now, unfortunately, just one long video rather than split up into chapters. That is not my doing. That is YouTube being YouTube. Don't get me started. Anyway, let's go to our usual place where I have to give you all the caveats due to the fact that I had been suspended for a week. This is an area that is less certain than some of the other things I'll be saying, which is the Ukrainian figures for the Russian losses of the day before. Inaccurate propaganda. Russia don't produce the same sort of figures, but I think they're indicative and fairly. I actually do think they're fairly accurate, but this is my own personal opinion, and they do reflect what has gone on the day before. So we have seen an uptick of personnel lost yesterday. In fact, that has been going up in a fairly consistent manner for about 3 or 4 days now. 820 personnel, 4 tanks, 10 APCs. Fairly significant number of APCs lost over the week. Slightly less than previously, but still a lot. 12 artillery systems and 3 MLRS is a significant number there. So that is, I think, worthy of note. One aircraft was lost. In fact, we've seen the footage of that. That definitely happened. 5 drones and 8 vehicles and fuel tanks. So a fairly, I guess, average in some respects for some of these figures, and in other respects over the average. When you look at the average for the whole year, 820 is a lot of troops lost. When you look at it in terms of what's been going on in this whole offensive phase, it is about par for the course, which is pretty bad. Of course, the question is how many Ukrainians have been lost over the same time period, and whether they are suffering at the same sort of ratio as the Russians. Krasnodar, which is to the east of Kerch Bridge, Crimea, it's that area over there. Locals report an explosion on the territory of a flight school yesterday. Waiting for more confirmation on that. I haven't seen too much other news about that. The mayor has said, no info on uh, any incident there. Apparently a sonic boom, possibly, but clearly not. There's an explosion going on there. If we're going to go, we're going to go back to Zaporizhia, where S-300 surface-to-air missile used in its ground-to-ground capability, more inaccurate, hit a residential block the other night. Now there's supposed to be 10 people, including a child, have died. So that number has ticked up. 7 more people are still missing, and 8 have suffered more. 8 more people have suffered injuries. So that's actually turning into quite a significant hit on a residential building, and looking worse and worse as far as civilians dying is concerned. Mahanets, which is this area, I suppose, shall I bring up the map? So if you don't know where Mahanets is, it is on the lake of the Zaporizhia power plant, which is here. So Mahanets, Nikopol, they get hit on a nightly basis with a lot of shelling. And Krasnodar is around there, by the way. That was what I was talking about just before. So this Nikopol has taken a lot of shelling again. As per normal, it just appears every night that it's on residential areas, and I just don't quite understand. But there was, interestingly, and this will refer back to this number, 12 artillery systems. It could be this. So there was talk about a heavy artillery, bunch of heavy artillery being taken out on the southern shores, if you like, or to the south of the lake here, the reservoir. And I think that's going to be in response to Nikopol and Mahanets being hit consistently. So there's talk that there was a bunch of artillery taken out there, and that could be why there's an uptick in artillery. But still, Mahanets was itself hit, as you can see there. Nikopol, sorry. Mahanets no doubt hit as well. They seem to be hit, both of them, every night. This is a bit of news that's just coming out now. So this is UK time in the morning. Ukraine has been fighting for a few hours already. there's talk about from pro-Russian sources that there is an offensive that has begun around Avdiivka, a bit like a big proper offensive. Uh, Again, this is OSINT Defender on both counts, so going to Russian source and then going to the Institute for the Study of War mapping, which they will be looking at various sources, including Russian sources, could be similar sources. I would like to verify this, but it could well be that Russian forces, as he says here, have reportedly launched an offensive on the Avdiivka front within the last several hours. Russian regular and airborne forces, supported by heavy armor and combat aircraft, are said to be involved in the operation. If Russia have been tasked with gaining the whole of the Donbass, then of course, just like Bakhmut, they are going to have to take Avdiivka. You can't take the Donbass without taking these two places. So I guess there is a sense in this. You might as well take the two hardest nuts to crack that are causing you a big headache and have been doing for a long time, and defeat them, because you need to do that. But there's going to be a huge task to take that. We're looking like another Bakhmut there, probably. Moving aside from that, I'll keep an eye on that for today. Going back to the map here, so that is the idea that if you're going to take the whole of the Donbass, so this is this area there, or this yellow area, if you're going to take that, then you are going to have to at least take Avdiivka and Bakhmut in order to move past there. Uh, just going to move down to the Crimea area now. That Russia's trench building at the beaches of occupied Crimea Peninsula seems that Russia is expecting another American style D-Day, American and British style D-Day. I doubt that's going to happen, to be honest. I will add this footage to it, which, as you can see here, this is, in fact, let's make that larger for you. This is someone looking at recent satellite mapping for Crimea, just going along the coast. Just look at all the trenches, the Dragon's Teeth, all of the stuff right along the coast. I mean, this is no longer, I guess, the Ukrainian Riviera, the great holiday destination if you got to sunbathe between trenches and Dragon's Teeth. But this is how seriously Russians are taking the defense of Crimea. There's an awful lot of construction taking place, as you can see. I mean, proper trench construction with sort of wooden hoarding, so on and so forth. Okay, let's move on now to military aid. Big news this morning, and I wonder whether anything like this will actually happen. But Rheinmetall, the German defense manufacturer, is negotiating the construction of a tank factory on Ukrainian soil. You'd think that'd be really risky. Quote, the plant can be set up in Ukraine for around 200 million euros. The company boss, Armin Paperga, has said potentially it will be able to produce up to 400 Panther type tanks annually. So this is a new tank that the Germans are producing, past the Leopard, we're now onto Panthers, and this is according to Der Spiegel. Again, it's risky trying to having something that's so obviously a target for the Russians built in Ukraine. It'll be open to sabotage, all sorts of stuff, even if it is right over in the west of the country. But nonetheless, if they didn't think it's worthwhile, they wouldn't be talking about it. Norwegian Leopard 2A4 NO tanks are being prepared for transfer to Ukraine, so expect the Norwegian Leopards to get into Ukraine shortly. Some nice pictures of them there. And now we've had the first armored vehicles purchased. So this is independently purchased, is not from a state. By the Serhiy Prytula Foundation, have already arrived in Ukraine. These are Spartan armored personnel carriers, combat vehicles for their repair and evacuation, FV434, medical evacuation vehicles, and other equipment. That's just to let you know what they are. These are, so it's late 70s, 80s, early 2000 or 90s, and then phased out, I think, in 2009, British APCs. I guess they're not going to be like the greatest APCs anymore, but perfectly usable for, we are seeing M113s being used on the front line in the Bakhmut area. So you can use M113s, and these FV 103 Spartans are going to be of some use for sure. So they've been independently sourced and bought for Ukraine, and you'll see them on the front line. I love this meme. It's always my favorite. So this is well, Germany has basically filed a request with Switzerland for buying back an undisclosed number of Leopard 2s currently in storage with the Swiss military. As confirmed by the Speaker for the Swiss Ministry of Defence, Switzerland keeps around 96 main battle tanks in reserve. Now, Switzerland. So, what are you planning to do with these Germans? Not sure. Like give them to Ukraine. So, I don't know that actually Switzerland will allow this. They might have news might have already come in that they've said no to this, but that's a lot of tanks that you could draw on. That'd be really useful for Ukraine to get their hands on. Be great if they could. Ursula von der Leyen has reported the EU will hand over 5,700 solar panels to Ukraine to help eliminate the consequence of Russian shelling of the energy infrastructure. Great news, or everything like that. You just need energy independence. I mean, Britain needs this. I've been arguing for a long time for renewables being one way of getting us energy independence, which gives you security. It's international security. You don't have to talk about, renewables and, if you're a real fan of fossil fuels for some reason. um, this is actually a sensible uh, s- thing policy to take with regard to international security. Um, if you're relying on other countries, they have leverage over you, or third parties can have leverage over you. Ukraine asked the EU for 250,000 artillery shells a month. Ukraine's defense minister, Alexei Reznikov, writes that his country's forces are only firing a fifth of the rounds they could because of lack of supplies. Holy cow. So they've got the material, they've got the howitzers there, and they are firing a fifth of what they could. It's going to be very difficult for Ukraine to be as effective as they can be on the battlefield if they don't have that ammunition. It's a really big challenge for Ukraine. I mean, it's a challenge for Russia as well right now, but goodness me, it's a challenge for Ukraine as well. Okay, a few points on the geopolitical front. So, yesterday, Russian President Putin signed a decree that if military defense companies within Russia fail to meet deadlines, martial law is declared and that these companies will be placed under the direct control of the Russian government. So, it seems like the Russian government, says Osint Defender here, is preparing for the long game in this war. And that comes from Reuters. That's an interesting positioning for the Russians here. They are gradually moving on to a war footing, increasingly so, and this is a move that really does indicate that they are making preparations for the war to to go on for a long time and to have some kind of really authoritarian grip over the country so that they can basically turn any any defense companies. But I suppose, yeah, how do you define a defense company where there are other companies that you'll be doing things for that, whether it's like producing food or whatever for the army, whether that can just be taken into the fold of the centralized government and nationalized effectively. So yeah, interesting move there from the Russians. Now this is worth watching. So the audience mocks the Russia's foreign minister at the G20 summit in India. Loud laughter started in New Delhi when Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov claimed that Russia did not start the war in 2022.
The war which we are trying to stop and which was launched against us using Ukrainian people, of course, it influenced the policy of Russia, including energy policy.
Fascinating that you know that that's got to tell him something when all these other foreign dignitaries are laughing in your face at making your Russian narrative claim. It's got to tell you something. It's interesting. Not so much news, and this is something I'll probably discuss in an extra video, but a corrective to the view that power in Europe is shifting ineluctably east. It's the idea that over the course of the war, you've had a lot of strong signaling from places like Poland. And there's this idea that the power in the EU is moving from the West, from places like France and Germany, and maybe Spain, maybe Italy, to these Eastern former Soviet bloc countries like Poland. and you've got other countries taking a stronger position within the power structures of Europe. But this is kind of correcting that idea. So this is an EU diplomat saying on any other topic other than Ukraine, they, meaning Poland here, don't even pretend to care. So this is the idea that okay, you're being really strong and power seems to be moving towards you, uh, but you're only that's only within the kind of context of the war in Ukraine. Otherwise, you don't really care. And in fact, I've been a big critic of Polish politics over the years. The Justice and Law Party that are in charge there are very, you know, me, I'm a liberal myself. Are very much I'm a social liberal, economic centrist. They are very much to the right. They have closed down abortion and reproductive rights for women there. They are moving closer to what Hungary. If it wasn't for the whole Russia thing, with Hungary siding with Russia and Poland being super anti-Russia, actually Poland have been moving closer to Hungary's kind of political stance on a lot of things. So I think Poland has been quite problematic politically speaking, but when it comes to Ukraine, they've been incredibly good and incredibly strong. And this is kind of speaking to that, which is, yeah, I don't know that there's long-term power shift within Europe going towards the east. On Ukraine, they're being super strong, uh, but on other things, they don't particularly care. So interesting that coming from Shashank Joshi, the defense correspondent for The Economist. Okay, I talked to you at length yesterday about the Bryansk situation, the Russian far right fighter. Um, uh, there has been some news coming out. So the Financial Times, who had a piece yesterday, has a further piece today. In fact, it's kind of reused its piece and adapted that, talking about the guy that's Denis Nikitin, who's the main guy that was seen on camera here. I mean, as I said yesterday, it's always interesting when people are very overtly showing their faces. There's no, it does make you wonder what's going on. All my claims about yesterday still kind of remain salient today. I don't think anything's particularly changed apart from this. So Russian authorities have struggled to formulate a coherent response to the attack. In a video address on Thursday, Putin said terrorists were behind it and claimed that partisans had fired on a civilian Lada Niva car. But Russia did not release any footage from the incident until a day later, allowing Nikitin's group to dominate social media as they posed triumphantly in spotless combat fatigues next to a village post office and first aid station. When Russia's Federal Security Service did finally release a video on Friday, it showed a Lada Vaz 2107 riddled with bullets but a Niva untouched, apparently contradicting Putin's statement. I showed you that. Two people supposedly dead inside, more likely someone just slumped over pretending to be dead, because this was after the people who had been injured had been taken away, supposedly. So why would you then shut the door and keep these dead people in there? Why had paramedics not seen them? It's all so utterly dodgy. And one of the car, there was no bullet holes in it, and the window was up, and the guy's slumped dead inside. It's just like none of it made any sense at all. And luckily, fortuitously, the on the one car, the registration plate wasn't shown, and on the other car, it seemed to have fallen off in the attack, like just bullet holes, but somehow the registration had bent over and folded and was utterly nuts. But this is the problem for Ukraine. So Ukraine has not claimed responsibility for the attack on Dugina and also attempted to distance itself from Thursday's incident. Mikhailo Podolyak, a senior advisor in President Volodymyr Zelensky's administration, called it a classic provocation from Russia. But Nikitin had said that Ukrainian authorities had signed off on the operation. Yes, of course, this action was agreed. Otherwise, it couldn't have happened, he said. How do you imagine that I passed through the dark of night there? There are mined bridges. There are cameras, heat seeking drones, there are hidden open observation points, he added. If I did not coordinate it with anyone in Ukraine's military, I think we would simply be destroyed, he said. But it's still not as easy as that. So Kapustin or Nikitin, he goes by both names, has connections to the FSB. So as someone here says on Twitter, I feel like the judgment is quite off here. So this is OSINT Defender saying that basically they're definitely connected to Ukrainians because he goes along with that kind of narrative. We do have some indications that Kapustin is connected to the FSB, meaning that him saying this could be to hurt Ukraine. If he was acting on Ukrainian orders, then surely the Ukraine would have ordered him to stay quiet on it, right? So if the Ukraine has said, "Yeah, I want you to do this," yeah, we're fine with you doing that, or we're asking you to do that. They're not going to say, "Oh, and by the way, afterwards, can you shout about it because as a really famous neo-Nazi, you'd be really good on the optics to shout about this." They'd be like, "No, you ain't saying nothing." But so it makes no sense. But anyway, he also talks about a Der Spiegel article that does link him back in 2019 to the FSB. So, or maybe you're being ignorant here. Oops, sorry, that's me clicking on it accidentally with my stupid fingers. You could just take a look at this Spiegel reporting on Kapustin from 2019, indicating he is linked to the Russian FSB. So it is more difficult than one might think, and I'm still utterly convinced that this is either the FSB doing it, or at the very most, it's a wingnut doing it independently of Ukraine, and then possibly even then getting the FSB afterwards as a post hoc thing after the fact. They're going, oh, we can use this, and then going with it. So, but I don't think this is ever going to be Ukraine saying, I know, we've got this idea. We want a bunch of neo Nazis to go up there into Russia to do this stuff and then to shout about it on social media and to wear lots of yellow ribbons and to, yellow tape and all this kind of stuff. It's just, there's never going to be the reality there. So I'm still utterly convinced this is not Ukraine asking this to happen. And it is at least, uh, well, there's some FSB involvement for sure. Anyway, moving on. I should have had this earlier when I was talking about trenches. Here is a map. So a guy called Brady Afric keeps a tab on the fortifications that Russians are building, and it is pretty massive. Like what they're building, it doesn't quite go into Crimea there, but there are huge amounts of defensive structures being built. You can see how many around the Zaporizhia area. It's incredible. They are definitely expecting an attack to come down from either Zaporizhia or from the Donetsk north of Mariupol, um, as at least according to what defenses they've built, and of course right up and down the front line as well. Uh, yeah, they've been very busy. Budanov, so this is head of the GUR sort of intelligence. The decisive for Ukraine, the decisive battle between Russia and Ukraine will take place this spring, and it will be the last before the end of the war. You could say that's just overt confidence there. That is bravado for the Ukrainians, but it could well indicate that they actually believe that what they have planned will be the beginning of the end of this war. Their big counteroffensives that they have planned. Uh, Nearly 10,000 soldiers have surrendered, according to the Kyiv Independent, well, according to the I Want to Live hotline, have surrendered via the I Want to Live hotline since its creation. So in September 2022, a 24-hour hotline that Russian soldiers can phone to surrender to see how they can surrender. Uh, they are claiming that nearly 10,000 Russian soldiers have surrendered. That's a massive figure. So when you talk about Russian losses, and there's some claiming that these figures include uh, the liquidated personnel might include wounded, deserted. I mean, there's an argument as to what liquidated personnel mean here, and it still goes on. There are different accounts for that, but 10,000 that could include that. 10,000 is a massive number to take out of Russian capacity there. Of course, verification would be needed. Okay, another little tidbit here. So, in fact, this is the last bit. Just right on time for the weekend, the natural gas prices in Europe, Amsterdam, fell below 45 euros per megawatt hour. This is exactly what Putin didn't want. He wanted to hold Europe hostage over hydrocarbons, over energy, and we've got to a situation where gas is now cheaper than it was before the war started. And I've said that before, but it's getting even cheaper. Like it's going cheaper and cheaper. So that will be a real annoyance to Putin because that was one of his major geopolitical weapons that he could use to um, leverage support for Russia, particularly in Europe, and he doesn't have that. Anyway, there you go. That's today's Ukraine war update news segment. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it. And I will be back with you for a frontline update at some point. It's quite difficult. It's Saturday, but yeah, hey ho. Toodle pips.